Bishop, you preaching about the power of pain. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, life carries pain, but pain can either be controlled by discipline. So you have pain as discipline, and then you have pain as consequence.
Okay.
What we run from is the pain of discipline, but the pain of discipline is a pain that builds character.
Okay.
For instance, I eat a certain way. I eat a particular way where I don't eat fried foods. I don't do a lot of things that are enjoyable. I don't eat pork, and there's no question in my mind that pork is probably the most tasteful of all meats.
Yes.
And I don't eat it at all. I eat turkey occasionally, fish sometimes, so I'm a vegetarian most of the time. And to most people, that would be extraordinarily painful. That's a painful way of eating. But when you consider that I'm 59 and I got a six-pack, I'm 59 and I can swim 30 laps, I'm 59 and I have 140 cholesterol, 125 really. Now I have pain of discipline, but I can predict the outcome.
Okay.
Now, to the individual who eats whatever they want, whenever they want, they have no pain until the arteries start closing. So and now you've got consequential pain. To the child who spent the time in the discipline of studying and making their lives work, they end up with a degree in, one of my sons is an electrical engineer. He's redoing the way they will test the next generation of jets. And he couldn't watch TV when he wanted to. I wouldn't allow it.
Okay.
Only on the weekends. During the week, no TV. Only on the weekends. Now, it was painful. But at the end of the day, what came out of it was a disciplined mind, a creative mind, an intellectual human being who is revolutionizing one of the greatest industries in our country. And so when you consider that, everybody's going to have pain. So it's either the pain of discipleship, of discipline, or the pain of consequences.
So, Bishop, if I'm hearing you correctly, we all experience pain.
No question.
And it's whether we experience pain now or later.
Or later.
Or you can put it in another way of putting it is saying either you can play hard now or play hard later.
That's right.
And if you work hard to get your schooling in now, you'll be able to enjoy life later.
That's the whole point.
And if you enjoy life now, instead of getting the books and playing around in school, you're going to pay for it later.
No question.
So
no question. Because a guy ends up in, you understand, a guy ends up in the system. Here's a fellow who refused the pain of discipline, ends up in the system. Now he's being tossed to and fro by everybody's whim. He is now in the vertex of consequence. You see, whenever there's discipline, and when I use the word discipline now, I'm talking about following the precepts, following the statutes, following the commandments of God.
Sure.
God is always right. And if you follow the commandments of God, then you can predict the outcome. Goodness and mercy will follow me. If I don't follow the things of God, if I don't follow the word of God, and I just live by my own whim, by my own lustful desires, by my own intellectual cognitive energy that is separate from God, then I can't determine the outcome. There are certain things in life when you just can't determine the outcome. Why? Because you're living by consequences. There's no purpose, there's no design, there's no plan. There's no discipline. And that's the whole point of the pain of power. Many times we have to endure a great deal of pain before we get to the place of power.
That's good, Bishop. And with the church today and the prosperity gospel and people naming it and claiming it, blabbing it and grabbing it, that there, how do we reconcile that? People want to experience the luxuries of life, but they don't want the discipline to be able to live by a budget.
Well, what we did wrong in the church bought into it, whole scale, particularly the American church. And really, because of TV, because of all the streaming faith and everything else that reaches the world, the world goes as America goes from a Christian platform.
Sure.
Because we are the influential Christians in the world. I mean, Europeans don't try to broadcast all over the world. Only Americans do. So at the end of the day, what we have done is we have preached Americanism for the gospel. capitalism. We have capitalized the gospel. And if you can't preach getting rich overnight in Somalia, if you can't preach it in Madagascar, if you can't preach it in certain parts of Nigeria and certainly in the third world countries, then of course it's not the gospel, because the gospel is universal in its presentation. The second thing we did, and it was psychologically debilitating, was we gave the impression that God does things for us instead of through us. And part of my message last night, as I was dealing with the whole issue of responsibility, is that God respects my intellectual cognitive energy. He respects how he created me. He respects my ability to think. He respects my ability to make choices, to the point where he gave me free will. And gave me the right to choose or not to choose him.
Sure.
So there has to be a great deal of individuality. There has to be a great deal of autonomy that man has separate from God. You know, if I were to take that further, you know, I would stretch people's minds and imaginations. But Job maintained his integrity, even though Satan was against him, the situation was against him, his wife was against him, and God was against him.
Elaborate on that, Bishop. How do you survive when you have Satan against you, God against you, and your wife, the people that's close to you, don't even understand?
In the second appearance of God with Satan, the second scene where they both came together, and the Lord said to him, "You've considered my servant Job, and haven't you noticed that he's maintained his integrity, even though thou movest me against him without cause?" So God himself said that I am being moved because of the edict because of the concession we made. I am being moved against him without cause. And Job still maintained his integrity. And the simple answer to that is, there is an autonomy that God allows man. God does not do everything for man. He partners with man. The first battle, when Israel left Egypt, God said to them, "The enemy you see through Moses, the enemy you see today, you will never see again." And he wasted Pharaoh's army in the Red Sea. The next battle, he said, not so. He said, as long as Moses' hands are held up, you will win. If his hands go down, somebody's going to die. Which means I want human participation. God starts things, we finish it. He put us in this world. He made a pristine creation. He set man in to be responsible, to perpetuate. And what are we doing? We're systematically destroying the ecology. We're systematically destroying relationships. With all of the technology, with all our communication skills, with all the stuff we have, we are still fighting in every corner of the world, because there are some things that will never change as long as man lives in the disposition attitude he has. Greed. And so the preacher tapped into folks' greed and got rich, telling them how to get rich. Just bring me your money and get rich. But the preacher never told them how. He had a plan when he was preaching the message. What plan do they have? He used his influence, his charisma, his persona, his grandiloquence, his ability to persuade, his influence. And the truth of the matter is, if you have influence, you ought to be responsible with it. Everybody's not going to be rich. Jesus said that. The poor we will have with us always.
So, Bishop, in this power of pain, we have a responsibility to basically procreate with God. We have to participate.
No question.
And as Christians, we cannot sit back and just wait for God to drop a car out of the sky, or
never happen.
To drop discipline, or to lose 30 pounds miraculously.
Yeah, you know, I've been to church and the preacher said, everybody who wants to lose a pound, bring $1. For every $1 you bring, you're going to lose a pound. Now, the only way they would lose pounds is if that was their last money and they were going to starve for a little bit. Because it's not going to happen like that. And I have seen and heard all kinds of nefarious presentations in the name of God. And people buy into it because they're greedy. Do you understand that the majority of people who do the psychic network are people who are poor? Psychic network.
Right.
And it's the same principle. You go to church and you want a word from a prophet. You want him to predict something, tell you something, call you out, and tell you what's going to happen in your future.
Now, if we can just get to the pain of studying the Word of God, discipline ourselves, we can basically prophesy to ourselves.
Oh, there's no question.
Because then the Word will basically lead us and guide us. And we will know, as you said earlier, the promises of God, if we follow it and live it, is guaranteed. So we have to discipline ourselves to find out what His Word says
that is the point.
Concerning us.
And how would I say that another way? I would say that individuals need to sow into themselves. And that's what we do. We sow the Word of God. We sow the principles. I mean, God is the author of economic principles.
Sure.
God is the author of all the education that exists.